I have the 2020 Michigan Wolverines schedule preview and predictions video ready for you right now. I've already gone over the first 3 games of the season in Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan State. Now we got the next 3, so let's do this. Those 3 games are at Minnesota versus Purdue and versus Maryland, and they're coming to you right now. Hello and welcome to Intermittent Sports, the channel where we go over Detroit Lions, Detroit Pistons, Detroit Tigers, and Michigan Wolverine sports. So if you're a fan of 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those teams and you bleed those colors, go ahead and subscribe right here. Click that bell notification so you don't miss any of the action. Go ahead and join the big house, baby. Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. And for fun's sake, we know that our hardest game off of these next 3 games is at Minnesota. So for that reason, I'm going to start with Maryland, go to Purdue, then go at Minnesota, just to keep you intrigued. So basically reverse order. Now in the last video, I have us starting out 3-0. Delusional fan? Maybe. However, hear me out, I have been pretty good in the past at predicting Michigan football, and I don't see that being any different here. Yes, we have a tough slate to start the season. It's actually very, very, very difficult, but I have confidence in us. I think we're going to get it done. Alright, so we're starting off with the Terps. One of the first names that I see is Deontay Demis Jr. He's a 6'3", 200-pound receiver for Maryland. He has very good cuts, great separation as a receiver, and when he gets the ball in his hand in open space, he's got playmaking ability. Last season, he hauled in 41 catches for 625 yards. That's good for 15.2 yards per reception, and 6 of them good for touchdowns. And as I mentioned earlier, goodness, he has some breakaway speed. What I really noticed were a few posts where he caught it up the middle, beat the safety, and was gone. So guys like Ambry Thomas, Vincent Gray, and Daxton Hill, when he gets past the first level of defenders, are really going to have their hands full. The next thing I want to talk about is their offensive line, which is a relatively youthful one, much different than that Wisconsin offensive line. This one consists mostly of sophomores and juniors. Nothing else too noteworthy that I know of, but something interesting to note. And definitely something we share in common with Maryland, as we kind of had the same scenario. Kwity Paye should be lined up against Jalen Duncan a lot in this game. He's a left tackle and he's only a sophomore. That's a good thing for us. That would be the Terps asking a lot out of Duncan, and I expect to see Kwity Paye in the backfield early and often in this game. Of course, I saved the best for last for the Maryland offense. Michigan probably thought they were going to be pretty happy when we saw that Anthony McFarland Jr. went pro, but that's not necessarily the case. He last year took a little bit of a dip, going from 1,034 yards to 634 yards. However, he did score 9 times compared to the 4 before. But Michigan fans will always know him as the guy that did something that our running backs can never do against Ohio State, which is crush them. He went for 298 yards on just 21 carries and scored 2 touchdowns. That is 14.2 yards per carry for all you non-mathematicians and Ohio State graduates out there. That's also very, very good. And to think that his team did not come out with a W. They lost that game 52-51, as you remember. But that's still much more competitive than we've made it. While it's great that McFarland's gone, he's going to be replaced by Penny Boone, a 4-star out of Detroit, Michigan. You heard me right, out of Detroit, Michigan. How he got out of state, I don't know. He definitely looks good on paper. His highlights look good. I don't think it's going to be too much of a step down, if at all, from McFarland a year ago. And lastly, at quarterback, and probably something we do need to worry about. You know, Maryland, we've beaten them pretty badly over the years, but they kind of hang around in that first half. Now they have Talia Tagovailoa, Tua's brother, and that's not a good thing for us. He ended up having to transfer because Mac Jones won that job at Alabama, so now we're having to go against another 4-star quarterback, and the guy who was 5th overall as a pro-style quarterback in the 247 class. It says on their 5th overall pro-style quarterback, but then it labels him as dual threat. I don't get it, but that's that. Outside of the skills and the obvious arm talent that he has, he's also a product of his environment. You know those Tagovailoas are winners. Should be one of the best quarterbacks Maryland has had in a long, long time. As far as the defense is concerned for Maryland, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to be able to go over this much with you, mostly because I don't know much about them. Here's what I do know. They allowed 34.67 points per game in 2019. That's not very good. They also gave up 177.9 yards rushing per game. That's also not very good, especially against us with Jim Harbaugh, who likes to run the football. And they gave up 271.25 yards passing per game. Also not very good. Michigan's offense is for sure going to be able to exploit that very, very weak Maryland defense. We will not have problems getting scores on the board. But I think the average Michigan fan is going to be disappointed in this game on the defensive end. This is one of those games where Michigan's defense is better than Maryland's offense. We're going to halt them most of the time. We're going to play well, but we're also going to give up inexplicable plays and long plays. Maryland has a lot of playmakers, and we do a lot of blitzing with one-on-one coverage, so unless that changes, we're going to have to take some of the bad with the good. I expect Maryland's total points to not be indicative of what we did to them throughout the game. They're probably going to score more than what we thought we gave up. But again, we're probably going to score a lot of points of our own, way more than them. They have a very susceptible defense, and we got some playmakers too, yo. Final thoughts on this one, I think it's going to be 41-28. I know that's a lot closer than what you would like it to be or what you think it's going to be, but I'm thinking that addition of Talia Tagovailoa, among others, might be some trouble for us on the defensive side of the ball. We won't feel great about ourselves after this win, but it's a win, and I don't care how we get it. Some weeks you just gotta survive. Next up, we got the Purdue Boilermakers. Guess what? They return Rondale Moore. That sounds like a headache to me. Let's get into it. Rondale Moore is absolutely spectacular. Let's be honest, he's going to do some damage to us. He is very, very good. One of the most elusive receivers in all of college football. But yo, like I've said, video after video, we've got some athletes in our secondary that can keep up. Some real guys who can go toe-to-toe with him and make things frustrating. Well, about as frustrating as you're going to make Rondale Moore. Now, the way I said that just now makes it sound like we're going to bottle him up. Nah. He gonna get his. But I can promise you it's not gonna be Rondale Moore against Ohio State 2 years ago, where he had 12 receptions, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, and ruin their playoff chances. Against us, I'm thinking something a little bit more modest. 9 receptions, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not much better, but better. At this point, we'll take pretty much any victory we can get over Ohio State, right? Look at this guy's stats in 2018. 114 catches, 1,258 yards, 11 yards per catch, and an astonishing 12 touchdowns on those grabs. Then in 2019, he got hurt. Ended his season early. You never like to see that. He's coming back now. Is he ready? Is he fully recovered? We're going to find out. Throwing him the ball will be Jack Plummer, and I don't know how to put this politely, but that's good news for Michigan. Last season, he only had a 59.8% completion percentage, averaged only 6.7 yards per completion, and his touchdown to interception ratio, 11-8. In other words, it could be tough for Rondale if the guy throwing him the ball can't get it to him. A lot of more stats and highlights in that game against Ohio State 2 years ago came with short throws. So if we can kind of limit that a little bit and get to him, we might stop more. Or at the very least, contain him. Lastly, for Purdue's offense, when Rondale Moore did get hurt and went down, their backup took full advantage of it. I mean, he showed up and showed out. I think it's safe to say that after you see these stats, you're going to see why Michigan can't just focus on Rondale Moore. We're going to have to actually have a really good game plan in this one. And that receiver was David Bell. He went for 86 receptions, 1,035 yards, and 7 touchdowns a year ago. And guess what? He was just a freshman. That's some good stuff right there, especially with Purdue's quarterback situation last year. This one might look a little bit like the Maryland game I was talking about earlier, with a lot of big play burst ability. So I guess it's a good thing that both of those games are at home. We won't have to deal with a mighty and ruckus crowd, and we may not have had to deal with it anyways, because COVID. All right, let's flip the script here and do with Purdue's defense the same thing we did with Maryland's defense. Purdue gave up an average of 30.58 points per game last season, just like Maryland. That's not very good. They gave up an average of 192.5 yards rushing per game. That's worse than the Terps and really, really bad. We should definitely be able to take advantage of that. And I should also note that in that category on the offensive side of the ball, they had just 83.3 yards rushing per game, so they really, really got beat in that aspect of the game. And lastly, and something that might be semi-worrisome, they gave up 243.7 yards per game by air last season. That's not extremely great, but it's pretty good. By comparison, Michigan gave up just 185.5 yards per game by air last year, which is better than them, obviously, but we're among the nation's best in that category. We also only gave up 122.7 on the ground, so, just a semi-flex there. So let's be honest, Michigan on paper has a legitimate statistical advantage over Purdue everywhere and anywhere. But I think I made it clear that Purdue has Rondale Moore and David Bell, and those guys seemingly can keep you in any game. Again, I think this is going to be a lot like the Maryland game. We're going to feel like we stifled them. We're going to feel like on most plays they either had a loss of yards, a minimal gain, or what have you. But at the end of the day, we're going to look at the scoreboard and we're going to say, what the heck? Like, when did they score and how did they score so much? It's the same kind of concept. A lot of breakaway speed, a lot of playmakers. We like to live on the edge on our defense. It's going to bite us in the butt a little bit in this game as well. We're going to leave the big house with a W in this one, 37-24, but it's going to feel more like 31-27. Get ready. Still, that's Michigan with the dub. And lastly, but actually first out of these three games, because I'm weird like that, we have a bout against the Boat Rovers in Minnesota, the Golden Gophers. What a season the Gophers had a year ago under their head coach, PJ Fleck. They started out the season 9-0, but hey, it wasn't exactly smooth sailing early on. See what I did there? Smooth sailing, row the boat. They began the season with an unimpressive victory over FCS opponent South Dakota State. South Dakota State is one heck of an FCS opponent, but an FCS opponent nonetheless. It then took them 2 overtimes on the road in California against Fresno State to win 38-35. As a lot of Big Ten teams have learned, going out west like that is not a good idea. It's a tough thing to do. Glad that our Washington game got canceled this year for that very reason. That whole time difference thing, it matters. It really does matter. So I'm not giving Minnesota too hard of a time about this, but at the end of the day, it is Fresno State, so it's not that big of an opponent. You got to beat them by more than that if you're a really good elite team. And then they squeak by against Georgia Southern and Purdue at 35-32 and 38-31 respectively. Regardless, they were undefeated at the time, and that's all that really matters. After that, they took care of business and got their stuff together, beating Illinois, then Nebraska, then Rutgers. But who doesn't beat Rutgers? All easy opponents, of course, but you should see the scores in some of those games. They whooped up on them and said, hey, we're mini and we're for real. And that's when they met Penn State at home. Penn State was coming in as the number 4 team in the nation after already beating us and Iowa, and there Minnesota was number 17 in the nation, feeling a little bit disrespected. Now, I called this game last year as a Minnesota W. I felt like, they were on the road. They'd started looking good, really getting their stuff together. Penn State, on the other hand, was fresh off of beating us 28-21 in a nail-biter when they were up 21-0 and only beating Iowa 17-12. And guess what Minnesota did? They got the job done at home. And guess what I said after that? They're going to lose at Iowa the very next week. No one wins at Iowa these days, it seems. Actually, it seems like the best teams have the hardest time at Iowa. I don't want to play there anymore. They lost that game 23-19, but nothing to hold their heads down on. They then went on to beat Northwestern, lose by 3 touchdowns to Wisconsin, which cost them the Big Ten West, and then they beat Auburn in their bowl game 31-24. A great season to say the least for Minnesota. So that was the 2019 Golden Gophers. What does this year's team look like? Well, for starters, they're losing their all-time all-purpose yard leader in Rodney Smith, as well as record-setting wide receiver Tyler Johnson. However, they are keeping 8 starters on that side of the ball, so it's a really weird mix of losing some key contributors but having a ton of experience. One of the most notable returnees is Rashod Bateman. He's a wide receiver who got Big Ten Receiver of the Year last season. All he did was haul in 60 receptions for 1,219 yards and 11 touchdowns. That's 20.3 yards per catch. Yikes for Michigan. Even more yikes for Michigan is the guy throwing him the ball had 3,253 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions a year ago. That sucks. I mean, that's good for him. It sucks for us. That guy, of course, is Tanner Morgan. He's the real deal. If you're doing the math right now, you're seeing that a lot of the guys that are returning are offensive linemen, and you'd be correct, their entire unit returns. And as much as I said speed kills for Michigan, experience is a pretty dang big factor too. The real test for Minnesota, outside of losing the guys that they did lose, is that their OC went to Penn State. So they got to backfill that position. This year it's going to be Mike Sanford Jr. filling that role. He used to be an OC out at Notre Dame and was a head coach at Western Kentucky. They'll need him to keep this truck moving and utilize Tanner Morgan the way he was utilized last season. Final thoughts on this one. Minnesota is a much more methodical offensive team than that of Purdue and Maryland. They're going to get theirs in a much different way than the Boilermakers and the Terps are going to get theirs. What's going to be frustrating in this game is just how long they keep the ball, how much time they take in between plays, just overall how the pace of play is so much different than some of these other teams we're going to play. We've been in a lot of games like that. Michigan State plays that way. Wisconsin plays that way. It's just totally different than Ohio State or Maryland or Purdue, their pace of play. It's just one of those things where it's frustrating regardless, but I feel like this is almost more frustrating because it's like now our guys are staying on the field longer and getting tired, and we're going to need them in the end. I'll tell you the best way to put it is it's going to feel a lot like the Northwestern game last year. Remember that that game, we fell down early. We just kind of gnawed our way in and just kind of hung around till the very end. It's going to feel like that. It's one of the first road games we're playing. It's going to be a huge test for us. We're not exactly particularly good on the road under Harbaugh, especially against good teams. So get ready for this one. All in all, I'm thinking we're going to give up about 27 points on defense, so let's see if our offense can score more than that. This is where Michigan might be in some good shape. Minnesota only returns 5 starters from last year's defensive unit. To add more fuel to the fire, 5 of their top 6 tacklers last season are leaving, most notably Antoine Winfield Jr., who left early to go to the big time. But the rest of Minnesota's secondary is still intact, including a guy we know very well, Benjamin St-Juste, a one-time Michigan transfer. So if you are going to return players on some portion of the defense, I guess the secondary is a good place to start. The rest of the defense, though, very inexperienced. That bodes very well for our inexperienced offensive line. And in a game where we need to run the ball really well, this could be a factor that helps out. This is going to be a very big game for Minnesota at home. They play Wisconsin on the road this season, so this Michigan game could be huge in that Big Ten West race. I am really glad they're not going to have full stands in this game. Playing at Minnesota probably isn't that much fun. And to add to what I was saying earlier, they also avoid Ohio State and Penn State out of the Big Ten East. So again, this Michigan game is huge for them, because if they can beat us and only lose to Wisconsin, maybe Wisconsin loses twice in the Big Ten West or against its cross-divisional foes and helps them out, throws them a bone so that they can get into the Big Ten championship game. Here's some itsy bitsy small pretty good news for us. They play us the week after Wisconsin. So it might just be that Wisconsin bruises and batters them and beats them badly the week before they play us, gets them a little sore, makes them feel a little bad about their egos. That's never a bad thing for the team coming in. But to answer the final question, no. Unfortunately, I don't think Michigan scores more than 27 to win this football game. I knew I needed to pick one game that we were going to lose out of our first 4 games. I'm looking at the schedule and there's a lot to choose from. Even at Michigan State is a losable game, obviously. But I didn't think we were going to lose that Michigan State game. Obviously, Penn State and Wisconsin, both very talented, but we're very talented as well, and we're good at home. I think regardless, we're going to start 3-1. It's risky of me to pick Minnesota as that team, especially considering who they've lost on defense. But this is the one I'm going with, I guess. So if we do end up losing to Minnesota, I think the team we're going to lose to is either Penn State or Wisconsin. I would argue that it'd be Wisconsin because we just don't really match up as well against them as we do Penn State. Here's why I did go with Minnesota, though. Jim Harbaugh, in the era that he's coached at Michigan, has proven time and time again that when we play against a ranked good opponent, which I figure Minnesota might be both, he just doesn't have his team ready. They don't look good on the road. They didn't against Northwestern. They never do against Ohio State outside of that 2016 game. They don't against Penn State. They don't against Wisconsin. We're just never ready on the road. The biggest thing is we just get off to slow starts, and it's hard to come back from those slow starts. I actually have more confidence in Dylan McCaffrey. He seems to have a little bit more ice in his veins than Shea did. So maybe if we get down early, we don't lose all hope. To me, though, this just looks a lot like the Penn State-Minnesota game that I referenced earlier from last season in 2019, when Penn State was probably the better team on paper, probably the better team in terms of athletes, but they had to go to Minnesota, and that home field advantage in college football is everything. Now, it's not going to be as much of a big deal this year, obviously, with COVID going on, but it's still on the road. It's still a whole different type of week and a whole different type of preparation for the visiting team. I think Michigan fans are going to be pretty crushed after this game. There's going to be a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, like what could have been if we could have done this differently or that differently. But at the end of the day, I just don't think we're going to get it. I think it's going to be close. I'm saying 27-24, Golden Gophers. Are they even called the Golden Gophers anymore? Someone let me know in the comments. I know a lot of teams are taking off Golden or Rainbow Warriors or whatever, so I can't keep up. Here's the good news if you're a Michigan fan. By my predictions, that puts us at 5-1. And if we are at 5-1, we have a great opportunity to go into Columbus and possibly steal away a victory to play for the Big Ten title. We did that in 2016 and 2018 in terms of getting to that game. Now we just have to finally take care of business. Don't have a lot of confidence in that, but we'll see. Alright, so that covers it for the first 6 games of the season. We have 3 more left. That's Rutgers, Indiana, and Ohio State. You're going to have to tune in next week to see what I think about those 3 games, and then I'll do an overall recap of the schedule where I go over all 9 games really quickly. Will we make the Big Ten championship game? Can Jim Harbaugh finally prove his critics wrong? Will we finally get past that horrid scarlet and gray. The only way to know for sure as far as what I am thinking is by subscribing right here. We would love to have you. We appreciate you watching this video in general, but we'd love to have you on the team and joining the big house, baby. And if you could, go ahead and hit that bell icon as well so you can be notified each and every time we post on Michigan football or Detroit sports. You guys, we have it all here. We're going to have live commenting for Detroit Lions games, live commenting for Michigan games, call-in shows on Friday nights so that we can get prepped for the weekend coming up. We've got previews and predictions like this. I'm going to make how Michigan fans reacted to this week in college football, how Detroit Lions fans reacted to this week in college football, kind of funny videos. We're going to have a little bit of everything and anything. This is going to be a very entertaining and fun-filled content provider for you. So if you like the sound of that, we'll see more of you here on Intermittent Sports. Until next time, go Blue.